Welcome everyone, it's Frank from Talking God's Grace. Here I am on the run, doing my work, and in between I'm trying to put up a video for you and putting up articles. If you haven't connected yet to the articles that are going on, what you need to do is, if you like the videos, press the like button. If you haven't subscribed and you like this type of content, it is a bit of a mixture of God's grace, that is the new covenant grace, the grace gospel, and its nuances, right? And also I have a website which I'm putting up articles on everyday light. I have a little text section going on every day, or try to do something every day. If I'm not doing a video, I'll try and put something on the website, and normally I'll put a link onto it to the website when I do these articles. But the way you know they're up and running is you've got to connect, or you've got to press this little bell button which tells you that the notifications are coming through when I'm doing this. So if you want to do all that, go ahead, you're free. I'm not trying to prompt you to do it, only just letting you know that that's what these features are for. So I'll leave that to you if that's what you want to do. In line with my current thinking on Jesus, on the grace gospel, on the messages that I'm putting up on Everyday Light, they're revolving around Jesus, of course. What I found interesting in looking at the politics of today, which sort of goes back to the time of Jesus, very interesting. Very interesting. You see Biden, you see Putin, and you see the other world leaders. The game of politics is very deadly. It's very ugly. You see power, you see greed, and you see people who are a little bit dark. Right? They're a little bit dark in their ways, and I don't know if you can survive in that type of field without having that little bit of darkness about you, you know. But as I'm thinking of that, I can see that in what I'm reading in the first century with the Jewish leaders and the way they behaved and interacted with Jesus, and their motives for going after Jesus. You see it clearly. I'm going to try and show it to you today. But also what I see is, my thought was, why weren't people believing in Jesus in the first century? I mean, he was doing all these miracles. These miracles, when you read the word sign, you know, they were looking for signs. These were supernatural things that they were asking. And in particular, just around the point of Lazarus's death and resurrection, that's when things started to get a little bit interesting with regard to the maneuvering or the movements from the religious leaders. Okay, so why didn't they believe in Jesus? Now that's a little bit of a background. Why didn't they believe in Jesus? Well, they were expecting the Messiah, for sure. I mean, it says so in the Gospels early on. We read that they were in expectations of a deliverance. Their expectations were, though, of a restored Israel, like King David, might in power, and at that time they were being oppressed by the Roman yoke, and so they wanted a liberation. You know, in the past, what they did was they got into alliances with other countries and stopped trusting in Yahweh to help them out. And so what these guys were doing now was a very similar thing. They were thinking, oh, the Messiah's coming and going to break them free. Okay, so Jesus comes along. He performs many miracles, but they don't see that as anything spectacular. There's no military being set up. There's no maneuvering in politics. You know, there's no sort of a similar system today to the Davidic kingdom. Jesus instead is talking about love your enemies. Can you imagine? They're going, I mean, this guy is doing all the things, doing remarkable things, but love your enemies? How can we love these people, right? So many, though interesting, as by the time we get to the time of Lazarus, actually a lot of them put faith in him. But they have strong opposition within their own ranks. In John chapter 7, it sort of highlights this for us. Sorry, I've just got my Bible open. John chapter 7, what's the scripture? 31. It says there, John 7, 31. They say this, yet many of the people believe in him, right? Because he's performing all these signs. And they said, when the Christ appears, will he do more signs? This word for signs is like a supernatural things, right? Will do more signs than this man has done. And of course, the pushback is immediate, and it's quite unsettling for Jews who were putting their faith and belief in Jesus. Notice this in verse 13, how people were feeling. There was much, in verse 12, and there was much muttering about him, Jesus, among the people. While some said he is a good man, others said no, he is leading people astray. Right? Yet for fear of the Jews, no one spoke openly of him. And what's the other scripture? And if we go to verse 48, this is now looking at the Pharisees, etc. And this is what they say. The officers, because they sent officers out there to get him, that is the priests and the Pharisees. So in verse 45, let's read the context. The officers went back to the chief priests and Pharisees, who said to them, why did you not bring him? And the officers answered, no man ever spoke like this man. The Pharisees answered them, are you led astray, you also? Have any of the authorities or the Pharisees believed in him? Right? So you can see now this pushback. And in fact, if you go to John chapter 9, verse 22, it says, his parents said this because they feared for the Jews. That is this healing of the young child, or the child that was blind. And then the parents just spoke up and they said, well, his parents said this because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess him to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Today, that's an equivalent of being excommunicated, disfellowshipped, and shunned, being an outcast. And you know what that's like, right? And so this fear is not a loving thing. So anybody that says this type of strategy is because of God's love, it's not. It's not God's love at all. It is to strike a fear in people so that they toe the party line. And this was the party line. Reject Jesus. We don't care what he's doing. We don't care how good he is. We don't care if these signs say that he is from God. We don't care. You just don't believe in him, right? He's leading people astray. Now, why on earth would they say such things? Right? Why wouldn't they believe in Jesus? And it plays into why people don't believe in Jesus today. And people don't believe in the grace gospel today. I believe there's some indication there that we can learn. Have a look after Lazarus's resurrection. What happens in John chapter 11? We see a little bit of behind the scenes. We get a glimpse behind the scenes what happened. The motives of why they wanted to get rid of Jesus and hate Jesus. It says, many of the Jews, in verse 45 onwards, many of the Jews, therefore, who came with Mary, had seen what he did, believed in him. Many of them believed in him, notice. But some of them went to the Pharisees, this is after the resurrection of Lazarus, went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council. They gathered the council, right? The Sanhedrin. Because this is where it was like the governing body of the day. And they gathered all together. What was the purpose? Verse 47. So the chief priests and the Pharisees, 47. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what are we to do? For this man performs many signs. Again, these signs of supernatural things. So they agreed. This man performs many signs. They're not denying this, right? It's interesting. If we let him go on thus, everyone will believe in him. Wow. See, they could see what he was doing was really popular. So what were they going to do? If we let him go, then everyone will believe in him. And the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation. So two things that come up straight away. What are they worried about? Their holy place, like it's theirs, right? This is ours. Of course, they were patriots. They were patriots. They loved Israel. But also their place, both our holy place and our nation. Notice that? Two things. So this was bothering them because if everyone believed them, then why would they, continually follow their leadership? So their leadership was in trouble. Verse 49, but one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all. He's saying, you nitwits, are you guys dumb or what? That's what he's saying. You do not understand that it is expedient for you that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation should perish. So what he was saying is, it's better for one guy to die than the whole nation to be destroyed. So what was he throwing up in their faces? We could get him on nationalism or patriotism, subversion. Isn't it better for one person to die than giving up on our nation, right? So here they had murderous intent on this man, Jesus Christ, who they confirmed that he was performing all these miracles. They didn't deny it. They couldn't deny it, especially with the resurrection of Jesus. The word was out that this is true. And so here we have behind the scenes what they were thinking. What was their thing? It was patriotism, right? And there was position, and there was power, and there was greed, and there was their own authority was being threatened by Jesus' life and example. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that how the grace gospel threatens others? Oh, don't listen to them. Are you fooled by them too? We're going to kick you out of our little group or our little organization or our big organization if you believe in these grace people. It's very similar. And, what's threatening these religious leaders, whether in Christendom or in whatever, is their position, their power, their authority that they have over others. Although they won't say that in that way, of course, they won't say they have power over the flock. They'll say, no, I have no authority over the flock. Yeah, you try to go up against a pastor or a preacher that has a flock or a governing body that is presiding over 8 million people, and you say something contrary to their beliefs, you are labeled, right, an enemy, a threat. Are you following these people, these grace people out there that don't have a following? They just believe in Jesus, believe in God's grace. Is God that gracious? Is God that good that He'll give you total freedom, right? Gives you complete forgiveness of your sins. Is God that good? There is a problem, friends, that underlines everything, right? That is deep-seated. We see it now in John 11. There was a deep-seated problem there. They were, concerned about their power and position, and they wanted to use patriotism, whatever they could, in this council meeting to get everybody on board to kill, basically, an innocent person, right? They had to throw something up and say, listen, okay, it's not the best, but hey, this is what we got, right? This is the best way we can get rid of him. because they feared for their own positions, right? And like a lot of people in power do. I'm telling you, it's very dark, right? And so there is another layer to this, why people don't believe. Now, many people were already putting belief in him, like the signs were there, the supernatural signs were there. But they were also fickle. They could be turned around. We saw that at Jesus' trial. They were turned around to follow Barabbas, right? At the jesting of the crowd, of the Pharisees and the officers that were saying, Barabbas, free Barabbas. And they all went from Jesus one moment to Barabbas the next, right? So there is another reason. If we look at in Ezekiel chapter 2 verse 5, Ezekiel chapter 6 verse 9, Ezekiel chapter 14 verse 3, Ezekiel chapter 18 verse 30 to 32, you know what you find? They had a heart problem. You'll find that they were rebellious in the heart. You'll find that they were adulterous in the heart. You'll find that in Ezekiel 18 that they needed a new heart. This is what the prophet was saying. Then in Ezekiel 36:26, it was revealed that they had a hardened heart, a heart of stone. I'll read it from the RSV. It's the only Bible I've got on me that goes to the Hebrew text. Ezekiel 36 and verse 26 from the Revised Standard Version, it says this: a new heart I will give you, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will take out of your flesh the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. So one of the deep problems that humans have, and even these Israelites had, remember, this goes back now centuries, right? And it was revealed that they had a hardened heart by the prophet Ezekiel, and this was holding them back, okay? They needed a new heart, and only God could do that. Even though they were encouraged to get a new heart in Ezekiel 18:30 to 32, now it's like God saying, you know what? I have to give you this new heart. I have to remove this heart that you got and give you a new one. Friends, and this is the same with the gospel today that's being preached. It's being preached to an unregenerated crowd, just like the Israelites who were unregenerated. And it's remarkable that people would believe in him. And those that believed in him really, really had to fight against that heart, that hardened heart, until the Holy Spirit could come in and dwell in them. And God did that operation and removed that heart at the day of Pentecost, and then moving forward, right? That's when it all happens. That's when the new covenant comes in play. So this is why I believe the Jews couldn't, or those that weren't serious about Jesus, could be easily flipped over by the crowd, by the peer pressure, by their officers, their religious leaders, is because, one, they feared people, they had a fear of man, and two, their hearts wasn't inclined to listen and to believe in a person that was being rejected by the authorities, right? You really had to sort of humble yourself and say, you know what, I see it all. Although I don't get it, I do believe that he is this, like those Jews said. I mean, is there anyone else that can do what he's doing? They had false expectations. They had all that wrong, because here's another thing to think about. When you go to 2 Corinthians chapter 3, Paul tells us something very, very interesting. So they had the scriptures, because in this divine work that was taking place with these physical people, okay, they weren't seeing what the scriptures were saying. And there was a reason for it. If you go to 2 Corinthians chapter 3, because if they saw what the scriptures were saying, they would have not had the wrong expectations. They would have had the right expectations. And then they would have picked up, hey, this is the Son of God. What on earth are we doing, right? we are hurting the Son of God, or we're not believing in the Son of God. Something is wrong. Why aren't we believing in him? But instead, they didn't do that. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, where is it? I'm just going to read from 12. I think it's from 12. Let me see. Sorry, guys. I should have had this prepared, but it just came to my head now. It says there, since we have such a hope, we are very bold, not like Moses, who put a veil over his face that the Israelites might not see the end of his fading splendor. But their minds were hardened, for to this day, when they read the Old Covenant, that same veil remains unlifted, because only through Christ is it taken away. Yes, to this day, whenever Moses is read, a veil lies over their minds. But when a man turns to the Lord, the veil is removed. Notice that? So, up until that day, and up until today, when they read the law and all the prophecies regarding Christ, they weren't too sure. Why? Because there was a veil covering their minds. And their hearts were already hardened, right? Or hardened like stone. So, I mean, there was a veil there they couldn't clearly see. And even Jesus quotes Isaiah in Matthew chapter 13 saying, ears they hear and eyes they have, but they can't hear. That's why he started giving illustration or parables, right? Because they just weren't accepting anything he was saying. And he was teaching this way, right? So there was an issue there. He could see it. They couldn't see it. And this is another thing. This is why it's important to accept Jesus, to believe in Jesus. Because once you believe in Jesus, all that veil comes off. And you can start seeing the truth for what it is. So guys, here's my take on it. We live in a world that is totally against the grace message. We live in a world that doesn't want to accept Jesus as the person. All the evidence is there. They can believe in him like the Jews of old. There's no reason to reject Jesus. Even the religious leaders that said, they believed in him, they believed in his signs, but they were more concerned about their power, and their position, right? And so, friends, don't be discouraged why people are not believing in the grace message. Many Christians are not believing in the grace message. That is your total forgiveness, past, present, and future sins. That is, you are eternally saved when you believe in Jesus. They don't want to believe in that. That's too simple. That's just too good. Just like Jesus was just too good. He was just like, wow, I mean, is there anyone else that can do this? Like, is there a better gospel than that? That's what they're saying. Literally, that's what it's saying today. Is there a better gospel than Jesus? Right? And people are saying, yeah, of course there is. There's Jesus plus all this stuff. That's what it looks like. But guys, that's a false message. And all this political maneuvering reminds me of the past. What's expedient? It's all about patriotism. And you got to be careful, because that also creeps into these little church groups, little groups that are going around, religions and their hierarchies and their threats to, excommunicate, disfellowship you if you go against them and their teachings. I had one comment on my website recently, which was quite hilarious. The comment made was, Frank, snap out of it and go back to the meetings. So, what am I supposed to snap out of? The truth of believing in Jesus and going back to a enslaved prison. I mean, right? But this is how this people think. And nothing against that person that wrote that. Honestly, I don't. But it's funny. And it's also sad, because then I look at them, I think, yeah, what else are you going to say? I mean, you don't want the truth. You just want to be enslaved, right? Whatever the religion tells you. And so, likewise, today's guys, we're living in a really interesting time, politically speaking, religiously speaking. Yet ultimately, the salvation, the only way to be saved today and have true freedom, is not by forming or jumping in one political group over the other. It's not by joining one religion over another. It's actually believing in Jesus. And He gives you the freedom. He gives you the true freedom, and you become a child of God, an ambassador for Christ. And whatever you do from there on in helping people understand this marvelous, beautiful gospel of grace, that's worth gold, friends. Honestly, in today's economy, in today's inflation-ridden, people are struggling financially. Although, I live here in a very wealthy country. All you hear is doom and gloom on the radio. People are struggling. Mortgages are high. They're over borrowed. They're listening to these sort of messages. Live the dream, and it is a dream. It is a dream, really. I mean, but it's not a bad world. But in terms of trying to live, but people are very, very anxious. Very anxious. So that's my thoughts for today, friends. Let me know what you think as you look back over Jesus' life, as we look back over Jesus' life. And, honestly, the world that He lived in is no different to the world we live in. Very, very similar. The politics are very similar. The games that is being played is very similar. Though the message that is being delivered is similar too. And there is only one message that saves. There's only one message that will get you through, and it is to believe in Jesus Christ. That is the message. Anything more than that will confuse you. So that's my thoughts for today, and I'll put it up on the video. I'll put this up later on today when I get a chance. Thanks, guys, for listening. See you later.